Hello guys, welcome to our channel Teaching Medical Physiology, and the topic for today is small intestine physiology. The subtopics that will be covered in today's topic include the parts of the small intestine, the gross parts of the small intestine, and the histological aspect of the small intestine in view of its functioning. So basically we're going to talk about the structure and the function of the small intestine from the physiological perspective. Now, if you look at this diagram, you can see that we have a diagram showing the gastrointestinal tract. We have the esophagus and we have the stomach. Obviously, they're not parts of the small intestine. So the point where the stomach ends, that is the pyloric sphincter, that point is the beginning of the small intestine. So, in other words, we can say this that the small intestine extends from the pyloric sphincter as a long convoluted tubule going all the way up to the ileocecal valve from where the large intestine begins. Cecum is the part of the large intestine that is connected to this ileocecal valve. So once again, the small intestine extends from the pyloric sphincter of the stomach to the ileocecal valve. The small intestine is a long convoluted tubule that extends up to 6 to 7 meters. This is a diagrammatic representation, so obviously it is way shorter. However, the actual length of the small intestine is 6 to 7 meters. It is divided into three parts, the first part being duodenum, the second called as jejunum, and the third one is called as ileum. So we have these three parts. Talking about each part separately, the first part, duodenum, is an important part. It is just 1 foot in length, and it is a C-shaped structure. So as you can see, it is a C-shaped structure, and in the concavity of the C, we have another organ that is lodged inside, and that is the pancreas. Um, the C-shaped structure is further divided into four parts. We have the superior part, then we have the descending part, followed by the horizontal part, and lastly, the ascending part. So we have the superior part, the descending part, horizontal part, and the ascending part. Now, the superior part is the portion that receives the acidic chyme. So it becomes one of the most probable sites to develop a peptic ulcer. This portion is also known as duodenal cap or duodenal bulb. The second part, that is the descending part, that actually forms the main C of the duodenum, is a part that has a small opening on its posterior medial wall. Posterior medial wall of the descending portion of the duodenum has an opening for the pancreatic and the biliary duct. And this opening is called the ampulla of Vater. Then we have the horizontal part, and lastly the ascending part. The point where the ligament of Treitz is joined to this intestine, it demarcates the duodenum from the jejunum. The second portion, that is the jejunum, is way bit longer than the duodenum, and it is 8 feet in length. Lastly, we have the ileum, which forms the last 12 feet of the small intestine. Functionally, we can say that duodenum is one of the important sites for chemical digestion, and jejunum and ileum are important sites for absorption of food. All right, moving further to the next slide, we have this microscopic structure of the small intestine. First of all, there are four concentric layers, and interestingly, these layers are more or less similar in all parts of the GIT. However, there are minor changes in each one of them, and that is what we are going to discuss over here. So the layers from inside to outside are as follows. We have the mucosa, first of all. The first portion is the mucosa. The outermost portion is the mucosa. That means the portion that is coming in contact with the digested food, the site where absorption is taking place. So, outermost in the sense when it is coming in contact with the food. From the body perspective, we will say that it is the innermost layer. So mucosa first of all, followed by the submucosa, which lies very close to the mucosa. And then we have the muscle layer, which is the muscularis externa or the muscularis propria. And this layer is the proper muscle layer, which we'll understand why it is called so in a while. And then last layer, a single cell layer, that is the serosa. Coming back to the mucosa, the first layer of mucosa is formed by the epithelial cells. They are simple columnar epithelial. That means there is a single layer of epithelial cells that are column like, so they are taller in size, and the epithelium, so basically it is the stuck part that is coming in contact with the digested chyme. All right, now this layer of epithelium is formed by a number of cells. The first and foremost cell that is important here is the enterocyte. This is the cell that does the digestive functioning of the small intestine or the duodenum, depending on the need. So the first cell that we know about is the enterocyte. This The second one are following enterocyte are these little broader cells called, marked in purple as goblet cells. They have a broader base and a narrower apex, and these cells are involved in secretion of mucus. Thirdly, we have another cell on this mucus simple columnar epithelium, that is the enteroendocrine cells. So they are endocrine cells, which we'll see why they are called endocrine cells, enteroendocrine cells. This is the third group of cells. They are a little lesser in number. So together these cells form the first layer, that is the epithelial layer. Followed by the epithelial layer is our second layer, that is the basement membrane. This yellow colored layer is the basement membrane. Why is the basement membrane important? The basement membrane is important because we need some place for these cells to settle into. So this is the second layer. This is followed by a big space where there are a lot of loose connective tissue, and that layer is called the lamina propria. This lamina propria gives path to the blood vessels and the lymphatics to cross over and enter into these elongated structures, which we will talk about in a bit. Following this lamina propria, we have the fourth part of the mucosa, that is the muscularis mucosa. It is a layer of single muscle cells forming the base of the mucosa. Please understand that muscularis mucosa is a layer that is separate from muscularis externa, because that is not this is not the proper muscle layer, whereas this meaning muscularis externa is a proper muscle cell layer. So there are four things: simple columnar epithelium, basement membrane, lamina propria, and muscularis mucosa together form the mucosa of the small intestine. Okay, I will talk about the other layers first, and then I'm going to talk about, sorry, then I'm going to talk about the villi, the microvilli, the plica circularis in a bit. So just wait. We have the second layer that is called the submucosa. It is the most vascular layer. That means it has the arteries, the venules, and also the lymphatic vessels. They've been labeled over here. Each one of them extends all the way up into the mucosa, supplying the villi. And So the lymphatic I have not drawn up all the way to make it little more clearer, but obviously the lymphatics, the arteriole and the venules, the capillaries from them extend all the way upward into the mucosa. There is another important layer here which is known as the mesenteries or the submucosal plexus of nerve fibers, that is located in the submucosa. All right. Following this, we have the muscle proper layer, muscularis propria. It is made up of an inner layer of circular muscle fibers and an outer layer of longitudinal muscle fibers. An inner layer of circular muscle fibers and an outer layer of longitudinal muscle fibers. Between these two layers, we have another muscle plexus, a very important one that is known as the myenteric or the Orbax plexus. So please understand there are two plexuses in the GIT. One is the submucosal, the other is the Orbax plexus. Both of them have their importance, and maybe in the next few videos we'll be talking about them. Lastly, we have the serosa, which is the last layer, single cell layer, and it is also known as the mesothelium at times. So it is, or the other names are adventitia fibrosa. Coming to the function of these four layers, primarily about the mucosa, the function of the mucosa is protection of the entire wall, because it is the first layer. So it is dealing with everything, all the acidic chyme it is dealing with a mechanical injury the mucosa is dealing with, and therefore protection is one of its function. Secretion. So these cells here play a role in some degree of secretion. There is the script of Libercu, which we'll be talking about. That is also a part of the mucosa. So that also deals with secretion. And obviously, when there are villi and microvilli, they also are dealing with the secretion portion. And they are dealing with the absorption portion, sorry. Second layer, that is the submucosa, supports the mucosa. So the submucosa is supporting the mucosa and also helps in absorption through the arterioles and the venules and the lymphatics of digested material. Thirdly, the muscularis externa functions has very important role in the movement of food chyme through the entire tract, and this movement is known as peristalsis. So muscularis externa helps in peristalsis. Also, there are sphincters that are located in different sides of the small intestine, and more or less in the entire GIT. And these sphincteric function is also given by the muscle layer, mainly the circular muscle layer. Lastly, serosa is just an external layer that is in contact with other intraperitoneal structures. I hope this bit is clear and understandable. Okay. Let us go a little bit into detail about these finger-like projections that you see, and what is plica circularis, and also the other structures. So let's start with the plica circularis. Plica circularis is also known as the valves of Kirkring. Valves of Kirkring. There are many other names, but the commonly used ones are plica circularis and valves of Kirkring. These plica circularis are permanent mucosal and submucosal folds. So valves of Kirkring or plica circularis are folds and they are permanent. So when I say permanent, unlike the rugae of the stomach, which disappear when there is distension of the stomach, these rings or these folds are permanent in nature. What is the purpose of them? They increase the surface area. So where are they present and all? They are absent in the first 2 inches of the duodenum, but their number and size increases in the rest of the duodenum and the jejunum. They are lesser in number and smaller in size in the ileum. They have all the layers of the mucosa. All the layers of the mucosa are located in them, and you can in fact even see them with naked eye. Their function, like I said, was they increase the surface area of the small intestine, and they slow down the passage of content, which help in better digestion and better absorption. So please do not confuse the plica circularis, which are these big folds, with the villi, which are smaller folds. Just let us for a second look into the next slide. Okay, so this one fold is one single fold of the plica circularis, and these pink like finger like projections located on the top are the villi. I hope this is clear. This single fold is the plica circularis, and this pink colored finger-like projections are the villi. So villi specifically are located only on the mucosa, and each villi, each of this villi has its own lacteal and also a lymph nodule. And the villi has these three type of cells are located there in the villi, that is the enterocyte, the enteroendocrine cell, and the goblet cell. This is on in the side is a smaller part or microscopic depiction of the enterocyte. So if there are enterocytes on the top, we have this pink color structures, that is the villi. And interestingly, on the top of these villi we have the microvilli. Okay, as this part is clear, I will like to focus on one thing here, that each of these villi has its own capillary network. I have not drawn it over here because it would become too confusing, but each of this villi has its own capillary network and a lacteal. What is a lacteal? A lacteal is a vessel of the lymphatic system. What is the purpose of this? That all the fat that is digested and then absorbed by these villi travel through the lacteals all into the blood stream eventually, and the proteins and the carbohydrates are absorbed through the capillary network. So this is an important point to remember, that the end products of digestion, primarily the fat is absorbed through the lacteals, and the protein and the carbohydrates are absorbed through the capillary network. Coming back to this other type of cells, goblet cell, like I mentioned, has a broader base, narrower apex. It is present between the enterocytes. It produces mucus, which this mucus lubricates the intestinal wall and protects the intestinal surface. The enteroendocrine cells, they also lie between the enterocytes and these ones in blue. And the specific thing about them is that they secrete certain hormones like the cholecystokinin and the secretin. Okay, coming back to the previous slide, there is a portion that we have not discussed. So we have understood this thing, that this is the plica circularis 1, plica circularis 2. On the top of them, these small black colored things are the villi. On the top of the villi, we have these small long finger-like projection, that is the microvilli. What does the microvilli do? Microvilli has the brush border epithelium, forms the brush border epithelium that secretes certain enzymes, and we'll discuss in a bit about these enzymes. Now coming to these depressions are known as the crypts of Liberco. Crypts of Liberco, or just crypts, they are single tubular intestinal glands. Single tubular intestinal glands that invaginate, so they go deep down, they invaginate deep into the lamina propria. So they invaginate deep into the lamina propria. They are present between these plica circularis layer throughout the length of the intestine, and they are also lined by the columnar cells. one of the things is this, that they are mainly absorptive in nature, but they also have other cells. So they have goblet cells with them which secrete mucus. There they have the endocrine cells with them. Then they also have the cells denoted by P, which is the Paneth cells. What is the function of the Paneth cells? Paneth cells secrete lysozymes, which is bactericidal in nature. So Paneth cells secrete lysozymes, which are bactericidal in nature. At the last bit in this pink color, we have denoted an S. This S stands for stem cells. So there are stem cells present here because all throughout the digestive tract there is movement of food, peristalsis, acidic chyme. So there is this removal of the topmost layer of cells, and therefore once that layer of cells gets removed, we have to have regenerated new fresh cells, and these cells are produced by the stem cells. So this completes the portion of the crypts of Liverpool. All right. In our next video, we'll be talking about the secretion of the small intestine, that is the intestinal juice, succus entericus. And we will also be talking about the hormones secreted by the small intestine, that is the secretin, cholecystokinin, GIP and VIP in detail. And lastly, the regulation of secretion, and also the functions, an overall overview of the functions of the small intestine. So thank you for watching this video. I hope this will make your understanding of the microscopic structure, the gross structure of the small intestine clearer. Thank you very much.